guys, it's Alice, and today I thought I would talk a little bit about the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. So this is like the only literary prize that I really pay much attention to, and I love seeing what books make it on the long list every year and what makes it to the short list and who wins, obviously. And last year I made a video about the long list and the books I wanted to read from it, and it was really fun, so I figured I would do it again this year. Now last year I hadn't read any of the books that made it to the long list, and I'd hardly heard of most of them. But this year I've actually heard of at least half of them, and I've even read some of them, which is kind of exciting. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go through the list and talk about the books that I've read, the books that I want to read, and the books that maybe I'm not that interested in. I'm going to start with the books that I've read, and I have 3. The first one is one that I wasn't surprised to see on the list at all, and I would have been very surprised if it wasn't on there, and it is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is a contemporary fiction novel, and it's set in Ireland, and it's about the relationship of 2 young people. I thought this was really interesting and kind of intense, and it's a book that's really fun and fascinating to discuss because there's a lot of things to talk about in this. I wouldn't be surprised if this made it to the shortlist or even won the whole shebang. The second book is one I read and loved last year, and it is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a historical fiction fantasy-ish novel, and it's a retelling of the Greek myth of Circe, who was a goddess of witchcraft. I really liked this. I thought it was well written and I loved the atmosphere in it, and this is one of those books I feel like most people would like, so it's fun to see it on the list. The third one is one I literally finished reading earlier this week, and it is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This is a contemporary fiction novel set in Nigeria, and it's about the relationship between 2 sisters, one of which is basically a serial killer because she keeps killing all of her boyfriends. Now this, I feel like, was sort of marketed as a mystery thriller sort of novel, but I don't really think that's what it is. It's much more about the relationship between the 2 sisters. I really like this. It's kind of weird and different, but I don't know if it's something that a lot of people would enjoy. It's a good book, but it has its flaws. The next 6 books are all books that I had already added to my TBR before the long list was announced, so I'd already heard of them and I already wanted to read them. And the first one is Number 1 Chinese Restaurant by Lillian Lee. This is a contemporary literary fiction novel, and it follows the people who work at this Chinese restaurant in Maryland over several generations. I think it was the cover that first drew me to this, but I was a little bit unsure whether or not I was going to go buy it because it has kind of a low rating on Goodreads, so I was a little bit unsure, but since it's on the list, I think I might read this one. The second one is one I'm definitely going to read, and it is The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a historical fiction novel, I think, and it's a retelling of the Battle of Troy. I haven't really looked that much into this because it was recommended to me after I raved about Stephen Fry's mythology books, so I just sort of feel like I'm going to love it. Next up, we have got Milkman by Anna Burns. This is a literary fiction novel, and to be completely honest, I have a really hard time grasping what this book is about because I've heard so many different things. I think it's about this young girl who is harassed by this older dude who people call the Milkman, and that like causes an issue or something. But I've also heard that it's like a dystopian novel, so I'm just really confused, and I've been a little bit on the fence about whether or not I wanted to read it because I couldn't understand what it was about, but I think I might give it a go because it's on the long list. Then on the list we have Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss. This is a little novella, I think, and I haven't looked that much into it, but I think it's about these people who live in the forest and they live as if it's the Iron Age or something. I added this to my TBR because I like Sarah Moss, and I've read 2 other books by her that I really enjoyed, so I feel like I'm going to really like this. We've also got The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I added this book to my TBR mostly because of the cover, so I don't really know that much about it. But I think it's contemporary fiction, and it's about this broken-hearted woman who is really entranced by this very attractive swimmer. And I feel like maybe he's a mermaid? No? Last of the books that I had already heard about, we have got Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. This is a contemporary fiction novel set in Nigeria, and I added this to my TBR because I know it deals with mental health and I feel like I haven't read enough books that deal with that. I'm pretty sure the main character is a young woman and she struggles with what is referred to as a fractured self, which sounds very interesting. Then we've got the biggest chunk of books, which are the ones that I hadn't really heard about at all, and we've got 7 of them, and the first one is Ordinary People by Diana Evans. This is a contemporary fiction novel set in London, and it's about 2 couples who are sort of at a crossroad in both their relationship and in their personal lives. That doesn't really spark a whole lot of interest for me, so I don't really think that I'm going to read this one. Secondly, we've got Praise Song for the Butterflies by Bernice L. McFadden. I don't know how this book passed me by because it sounds amazing. It's set in West Africa and it's about this woman who lives a pretty good life and she's fairly happy, but then something happens and her father places her in this religious shrine and she really suffers there and she spends like 15 years there. I just think that sounds so interesting, so I'm definitely going to get myself a copy of this. The next one also sounds really good and it's got a very good cover, and it is Remembered by Yvonne Battle Felton. This is set in 1910 in Philadelphia and it's about this woman who has just lost her sister, who she was very close to, and her son has just been charged with a crime that can lead to his death. And it's about her struggle to bring her son home. Again, I don't know how this book passed me by, but it is a very recent release, so maybe that's why I hadn't heard of it yet. Then we have got Swan Song by Callie Greenberg Jeffcott. I feel like I may have actually seen this book somewhere, but I can't remember where and I never really looked into it. But it's a fictionalized account of Truman Capote and the elite circle that he hung out with, and it's about how he told the world about them and their secrets. I don't really know if I'm going to read this one. I might if it makes it to the shortlist. Next on the list there is Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. This is a contemporary literary fiction novel about a family who goes on a road trip, I think. I'm not super intrigued by this and I have read something by this author before and I didn't really get on with it, so I think I might pass on this one. Second to last, we've got Bottled Goods by Sophie Van Leeuwen. This is set in 1970s communist Romania, which just that is enough to make me want to read it, and it's about this woman and her husband who becomes persons of interest to the Secret Service after the woman's brother has defected to the West. I just think that sounds fantastic. We've made it to the end, people, and the very last book from the long list is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. I have actually seen this cover somewhere as well, but again, I never really looked into it. It's a contemporary fiction novel and it's about a couple who get married and then they settle into their lives together and then something happens and they're torn apart. To me, I don't really think that sounds all that interesting, but I have heard that this is a very good book, so if it makes it to the shortlist, I might read it, maybe. Okay guys, those were all the books from the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. I'd absolutely love to know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or if you want to read any of them and all that good stuff, and I will see you soon. Bye!